like to now introduce Dr. Charles Gbollie, and I am so impressed by Dr. Gbollie. I just met him in November, and in fact, when they said Dr. Gbollie is going to speak, I said, okay, I'm looking around for the doctor, and I expect to see someone as aged as myself. But in fact, I see someone who is younger than probably younger than my last children. And I'm so proud of him and glad to have met him. And I'd like to say, Dr. Gbollie, please be no strangers to this group. You have the same idea as we do, that we reach out to the youth and try to save as many as possible. And I like to say that we will adopt this policy. It has not been practiced as I can see, but I'm hoping that this organization, Voices of the Elder, will be like the little boy, picking up the starfish and throwing them back into the ocean. Okay. Dr. Gbollie, you are welcome. Thank you.
He is a passionate youth and student leader, educator, researcher, media practitioner, corporate consultant, lecturer, and motivational speaker. Dr. Gbollie addresses critical issues related to human, social, and educational environment of all individuals, especially young people. He is a staunch campaigner and promoter of better youth today, much better world tomorrow. Dr. Gbollie is the founder and executive director of the Foundation for Research, Education, and Empowerment, Free Liberia, a Liberian NGO dedicated to improving lives and interventions through research, education, and empowerment programs. He is also the founder and president of Youth Champions Alliance Network. Dr. Gbollie has vast work experience in both public and private sector. He earned his PhD and master's degree in development and educational psychology from Central China Normal University in Wuhan, China, and BA degree in sociology from AME University, Liberia. He is a proud recipient of Diligent Student Award and International Excellent Student Award, among others. Wow. This is a wonderful man we're about to listen to. He's the author of several books and other publications. His book is called Tough Times, but I have another book in my hand called Normal Times. So please, somebody write a book called Good Times. At this time, the floor is all yours, Dr. Gbollie.
The voices of the elders, I believe, are the voices that God provides, because these are individuals who have gone through different times in their lives, and by us hearing their voices, we are hearing what happened yesterday, and we are also hearing what is happening now, and there is a high likelihood that we are also hearing what will happen tomorrow. So we want to use this time to, in particular, recognize all of you that have been doing so marvelously well for our nation, helping to make sure that we as a nation don't go back where we are coming from, because the price has been paid in a huge manner. Each and every day I say to myself that people have paid the price for where we are. And we as young people cannot afford to let that price go down. And we have that sense of responsibility to make sure we keep that. In November last year, I received the first invitation to speak when we had the event that was held in Bond County, specifically under the theme Historical, Cultural, and Socio-Economic Perspectives of Liberia's Bicentennial from 1822 to 2022. It was a very wonderful event. It was wonderful because we are all discussing how far we've come and presenting different ideas how to help our country to move forward. And at that event, I had the opportunity to also speak on intergenerational change, trying to bridge the gap between young adults, older adults, and young people to be able to promote peace and development in our country. When the year was ending, I was reflecting on some of the good things that happened to me during the year. And I noted that as one of the best honors and achievements that I actually had, to have been invited by the elders to speak at such an event they organized along with other young people. This is because I remember when I was very young in the village, most of the time when the elders call you, you get scared. You become a little afraid, because most of the time what I saw coming up in a little village in Lofa County, called the village Sakpawa, when the elders call you, it's like you have done something wrong and they want to penalize you. So that's why they've called you, so you'll be anxious. And then this other call that I received from the elders, it was not that kind of call. It was a call to sit, hear from the elders, and also be able to say something. I would have loved to see more young people here so they can be able to clap for you all. I will ask some people who are here still in their youthful age to also clap for you, because I believe that this is the world we are looking forward to, where both those who have been there and are there also want to hear from those who are coming through. That is trying to create transition and keeping the country moving. I believe that is actually very important, so I feel highly honored that you are giving me the chance. I'm not afraid, because I know you call me here not to chastise me, but you are calling me here to share my thoughts on a particular topic you are giving me. And even if I did make mistakes and other things, you are able to mentor, correct, and at the same time provide advice in that regard. So again, thank you very much. All of us, and of course, some of you were even around and actively knew what was going on and tried to stop them. On December 24th, 1989, few years, I was just around 2 years or so from my birth, a faction of the Liberian population, in my opinion, initiated what I will refer to as the greatest form of violence and hooliganism that we come to know as war in Liberia. And we realized that years following that process, for 15 years, every Liberian, whether old, young, or just born like myself, experienced that suffering that comes along with violence, with all sorts of vandalism that happened during that time. And we know vividly for a fact that over 250,000 people lost their precious lives, and of course the consequences thereof, we still see some of them today. Now, where I'm coming from is we are going to talk about violence, and these things have taught us some lessons before. In fact, I remember when I was just little told in the early 90s, starting to know what was going around, that the most educated person we had in our family then was affected as a result of that conflict. And I remember the situation of the family and surprise and sadness while other things were happening. I know all of us in this room, one way or the other, have our own stories to tell, how the war hit us so hard and affected all of us. To me, that is a particular warning or particular information that we cannot forget, and we have to teach our generation as much as we can to make sure we never revert to such bitter past that have been able to cost us so much. And of course, considering that even universities or high schools and other places that we expect where young people are preparing for the leadership of the country, for different contributions they want to make in the world, we also see pockets of these signs that are written on the wall telling us that we need to do more to stop violence and hooliganism. So I was asked to talk on the subject, violence and hooliganism, is this the way to go? And of course, as we proceed in this lecture, we'll be able to answer the question and also share some thoughts. I will quickly share a few thoughts if I think about violence and hooliganism, and also from the historical perspective of Liberia and how, as I just explained from the war situation, how it has affected all of us. And then we'll also look at the effects or dangers that we tend to experience as a result of having such situations, and then what mechanisms we can put in place to make sure we don't revert to the bitter past. And of course, I will have words of encouragement to you and young people in here and others who will follow this particular discussion either on the radio or online, as we always do with various programs we speak at, to be able to carry the message forward. And then we'll wrap up with the way forward as a people. Now, what are the thoughts that I share? Thinking about what I just explained from the start, that the situation of any violence or conflict will cost all of us much more, sometimes more than we can imagine. The first thing I would think about to say is that to destroy something you have in the name of advocacy for what you don't have is not a wise decision. To destroy what you have in the name of advocacy for what you don't have is by no means a wise decision. Most of the time when we think about advocacy and some of them leading to violence and different things, is in a way there's something we want, and then while advocating or pleading for that thing we want, we end up destroying what we've already labored for. I'm saying here that that action or such decision is not wise. Imagine somebody either hit by a bag or a certain security situation in the community, and the community will resort into violence and maybe put the police station ablaze or cause other things. What that means is that as much as you want justice, you want something to happen, but by using the means of violence that will have the likelihood of destroying that, I believe that it is not wise. And therefore, I will recommend that we must never allow our emotions to lead us into a wrong motion of violence and hooliganism. That's the first thought that comes to my mind. The second thought that comes to my mind is that violence and hooliganism are not a language. They are not a language. Those who speak or provoke it must rethink and learn a new language of non-violence, peace, and unity. Some people believe that violence is a message or is a way that people will be able to get your message out and then they'll be able to respond. It is not a language that you should speak for others to respond to you. So if we have such mindset or such thinking that if we cause violence, government will come to our attention or other stakeholders will come to our attention, we have wrong perception and we need to change it. Another thought that comes to my mind is that every time you think, imagine, or perpetrate violence or hooliganism against another person or institution, you are doing it against yourself and the next generation. When people agitate or want to push some things, most of the time they end up harming themselves. And that is why when we look at the situation of the conflict, even those who thought that they are bringing it forward or they are doing that, they end up either becoming victims directly or even indirectly. And that situation did not just affect them. If they have children now, those children are also affected no matter where they go. Even they go in the US or go anywhere, the name Liberia will definitely be on them. And even if they make any attempt, for example, to change their nationality, you cannot change your blood. You cannot change certain dimensions of the person you are. You will always think about your home. And when that home is not a home that when people talk about, that you feel proud of yourself, it will always remind you of your role that you have played. And so whether it is in politics, in sports, in education, or in the home, violence must not be the remedy, must not be the way forward in trying to do or act in a way to correct situations. I like what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, whether we must live together as brothers or we'll die as fools. That is a brilliant saying. So as citizens of this country, in spite of our ages, in spite of our background, or wherever we find ourselves, we have to live together as brothers, as sisters, or we will be compared to die as fools. And it is my hope that that is not going to be our portion. The second thing is that trying to understand what violence and hooliganism is. According to the World Health Organization, violence is defined as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatening or actual against oneself, another, or against a group of people or community, which results in a high likelihood of injury, death, physical, psychological, or other deprivation. So violence is what is initiated intentionally. It doesn't happen when people take gas or take something and start initiating things by accident. These are things that are planned and calculated and executed by people, so they are intentional. And it can be against oneself. It can also be against other people or institutions that we have. And this has been around for a long time if we try to provide some understanding regarding the subject that we are talking about. Even from the time of slavery, that's a form of violence against a person, because you dehumanize a person, you make the person to feel subhuman or in a way that they are not. And even in different ways, through rape, through different things, those are violence that we all have heard about. And again, this is something that all over the world that is causing a lot of lives. In fact, as part of the preparation, when I was looking at statistics of people who suffer from violence annually, we realized, according to Wikipedia, that an estimated 1.28 million people suffer violence every year. And that is so much, a huge number. Of course, from the definition I said earlier, this includes wars and different forms of actions against people that stop them from performing their actions. And we have the responsibility to make the society a peaceful society. When we're talking about hooliganism, it's also another form of violence, but this one can be defined as disruptive or unlawful behavior such as rioting, bullying, or vandalism, usually in connection with crowds at different events. And this is what we experience even on this campus or other areas during different situations in our time. And we have a responsibility to make sure we limit and reduce violence so that we can live in peace and fulfill our dreams. In fact, the reason why we exist. I believe that violence and hooliganism is when we use our interested authority to suppress or dehumanize another individual or hinder the progress of the country. And I'm just trying to put it in my own words what it may be if we are trying to look at violence and hooliganism in the context of different actions we carry out. It is utilizing some form of authority you have to suppress or dehumanize an individual or hinder the progress of the country. So when in our homes we use our strengths for war against women and girls, or we perpetrate violence in different ways by either stopping them by physical assault or abuse, that is also some form of violence. And also when we use our positions where we find ourselves to make sure we suppress, in particular, women and girls to submission, and also stop certain progress they should make in the society. Those are other forms of violence. And when I teach at graduate level, especially the course guardian counseling, one of the things that I teach and emphasize very much, and I want all the students then to remember, is that if you can help, you must not hurt. If you can help somebody, don't hurt them. So again, I will add here today that all of us have the responsibility. If we cannot help the situation, it should not be by any means that we should be able to expand or make the situation to escalate. So in understanding violence, once again, we have to understand it from the general aspect up to bringing it to the home where different things are happening, and then bringing it where we work at different institutions where certain sort of authority is given us, and that authority given us is given to us by people, and then using that authority against the people. I think that's the worst thing to actually do in life, when you are entrusted with certain power and you try to use that power against the people. Historically, when we're looking at violence and hooliganism, we see that at different points in our history, we have had that of some sort. For example, if we look at the history, records that there were conflicts and wars between settlers and various indigenous ethnic groups that came through, and we understood the situation of land conflicts and different other conflicts that happened then. But one thing I can say, and I mean you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they actually manage their conflicts, their violence very much. Because if we can have our independence in 1847 And up to 1979, when we had the Rest Riot, we didn't see any, in my reading, any violence that spread nationwide. We didn't reach to the extent where as a country we resolve to doing something that will carry us far behind what we have struggled for. So starting from April 14, 1979 Rest Riot, we saw that violence started to degenerate and going further. And then in 1980, on April 12, like you know, we realized that we had that coup that changed almost the governance structure of our country and have been able to carry us somehow far behind. And the writings are on the wall today. So what I can say is that we need to do more at this time, because the country existing for so many years, not resulting in any nationwide kind of conflict, but in our time we have seen that in different ways. I think that we need to rally more and do more activities that will help us to promote peace and tranquility in our country. We don't need to go into the effects or the danger in the spread of the violence we have across the country. Right from 1979 and coming to the 80s, 1980, we saw not just the murder of a sitting president, we also realized that even officials, those who have resolved to give their services, their commitment, their contribution to the country, can even fall victim of such a situation. And following that, many things happened that led us to going backward. So the effects are very huge. Like I was just telling you, I wouldn't have imagined how that best educator we had in the family, who was in town then, we were just still in the village, who have done to even protect other family members or make his own contribution to his nation. But then, before all these things started, most of the time, and I hear this very much and I admire that, when we hear the story of the normal days. The normal days, as we always hear from you, we are told that during that period, even our economy could have been or was compared with Japan. These are developed countries that are now advanced with many other countries that we know. Those were the normal days for us. We also realized that even in the education sector, we used to have people leave other countries and come right here to this university to study and to learn on our own ground, on our own soil. And then afterward, they go back. Those were the time that we heard about those normal days. And no wonder when he was talking about the poem and talking about normal days, it drew my attention to the same thing we're talking about, the normal days. Because we even heard, I had a education sector review just in March. I was driving along with one of those that saw the 60s, 70s, you know, and were trying to explain. And was saying how he was in the Ministry of Education and different other things like security, like transportation, different things were quite robust and prompt even when something happens. So the conflicts, having a lot of conflict said about those things, and you don't seem to be getting that, it hurts. Because it is even better than you didn't hear it or you didn't experience it at all. At least you will get used to it. But we now have the responsibility, and that is why I'm saying that we have paid too much of the price for violence and other forms of vandalism that have been able to bring some form of setback to our country. It becomes more worrisome. In fact, if we see that trying to show face in some way at this point, even right here in March, I remember just the students that are having some other groups here, you know, they had issue and other things happening with another lawmaker. Those are sounds that don't speak well and that don't remind us of some of the things we still suffer as a result of what we did before. Now, I will talk a little bit in my suggestions and recommendations of moving forward, that one of the things that we seem to be missing is that we have not been able to preserve enough those things that happen to us, not to just do them now, but to guard us diligently to save ourselves from repeating that. And I had that experience in March when I visited South Africa, and I see, and this is a country many of you knew, and different things that happened then during the fight against apartheid and all that. When you visit that country today, you will not only see the transformation and the change that has been done there, but they have done everything possible to make sure those things that happen, they don't forget. Because a human being is quick sometimes to forget about those things, and that is why sometimes we end up going back to those things before. We visited even their constitutional code, the way we have the Supreme Court. There, before you even enter, all the pictures, the prison is where Mandela, Gandhi, and other leaders were even held. It's right by that place. There are pictures in the hall that should remind even the lawyers, even the judges, to be aware that any action they take here, somebody has paid a huge price with their life. So in a way, I will conclude with that recommendation that we need to, especially with your voices being so strong, to be able to find a way, not just through the mission, but through different institutions, to have a way where young people and others coming even after some of us will be able to see that in 1980, we saw this situation with the president, we saw this situation with officials, we saw other things happening, we even playing with the Constitution, and so much more that we need to keep or we need to talk about. So as we know, the consequences are endless, and everybody, in spite of who is doing it, can feel or face the price of that. And different drivers can trigger that. And for example, we see that drugs is becoming somehow, unfortunately, a new normal. And you hear this and see many young people and others getting involved, and we are not creating all the necessary checkpoints we need to create to stop them, to stop that from happening. Because if you manipulate your own mind or your own system, you may carry out some action before even knowing it. And it can be very dangerous, especially as we go into election and other things. We have to step in to make sure we protect our country from violence. Now, there are alternatives to violence and other things. One thing I like about the word is that not just our country, many have recorded different things that are happening to them. They have been able to document them that we can learn from. For example, India, how did they fight against a particular situation that they could even plunge the country into different things? Mahatma Gandhi, we know the story of how he utilized, for example, non-violence approach to be able to get somebody to succumb. There are different actions, whether it's in the US, talking about you don't sit on the bus, somebody will choose, okay, I will not say, I should not sit to go to work, I will walk. And all those things are available. Like even in South Africa, one of the things that we remember, one of the best leaders Africa have had, in fact the world has had, Nelson Mandela, how they used the approach not just to take arms and go against others and begin to fight, because in the process, even those you are trying to fight for will be affected. And even yourself, you could be killed in the process, or something else will happen to you. And initially, one of the thoughts I shared was that you cannot, in your advocacy for change, destroy what you already have. I think it's a price that is not worth paying. You have to diligently try to safeguard what you have. Like the hall, we have improved it in some way. We can't want a bigger building and come and destroy this in a way of calling for more resources to build a new building. You have to make sure this is standing and is well protected while you exercise other means without violence, so that you can have what we want. And we saw that with different leaders. So I'm saying, as part of this discussion, it's not just to talk about how harmful violence is, how it has been able to cause a lot to different people, but to also find remedies. And we can learn those remedies. I believe that students today who are in some way agitating, whether it's for your lecturers to return to classes, or for increase in budget, or for certain conditions to be improved, we are saying that you can do better. The approach of trying to burn or attack an official or do something that has the propensity to carry the country backward is a price that we must not pay. And all of us, we have the responsibility to learn from those people. So we should not see violence as a new normal. Like I said initially, that this is not a language that anybody will hear. And if we speak it, perhaps only us will hear it. And that hearing will also come and affect all of us. We can use dialogue. We can come to the table. We can find means to be able to solve various problems that we face. As I draw close to wrapping up, I want to encourage you in particular with your wisdom and power and your years that you have had and your influence, even the children and others you have, that all of us will follow your lead. And one thing I can say is that you inherited some normal days, or you created normal days. That was wonderful. Today, in my generation, if we don't create, or if you don't help us create the normal days, then we miss something. And in a way, most of the time, whether knowingly or unknowingly, the blame is normally sent to somebody who came before. So it's also a challenge to you as well, to do as much as you can do, whether as the minister does through her writing and through different advocacy and influence, to be able to push for peace through different documentaries and materials being produced, so that the generation can be able to follow those and follow that lead and not go back. So that responsibility, I'm saying to us, and it's my message to you in particular, older adults, that you also have a huge responsibility to promote peace and sanity for our country, to make sure that as you inherited or created those days you enjoy so well, let that be like a mission, like something you want to do for as much as you can in your writing, through your influence and gathering like this. A message should go forth that indeed there is a strong need to protect what you have fought for. Some of those things you have sacrificed and people have paid. So before your own eyes, let it not be something that will go back. I have few young people in this room, and so I also want to encourage the young people, since I have the opportunity to speak at this lecture series. In one of my books, I identify the significance of young people through different roles we play. And I highlighted 6 different things. Maybe I'll just talk about 3 before I relate my message to you, in particular young people in this room. One thing I wrote was that you possess the freshness, the vigor, and enthusiasm. So today when we see young people, the energy I have, I can even run from here to Nan Street and maybe come back, and different things, different assignments, different exercises. Even to prepare for this, I could just sit all night and I will still have strength in the day to do other work, even come here to speak. That strength is a powerful blessing that comes with being youth or being young. I will talk about the preservation of such strength, but the second thing I highlighted was that we have the power for societal change. Young people, we are now in majority in this country, and that is why, especially this year, politicians and others who want power are trying to rally around young people because they are able to create change. We saw that in the north of Africa, the Arab Spring, some years back, in different areas. So the change we see in the society, I believe that young people can play a major role. Young people are also the hope for the future, and that is an opportunity. to be the one that people should look up to, for what tomorrow is going to bring. So my message to us, and I'm not only saying this to you in particular, young people in this room, I wrote here that everybody needs what you are carrying, and that is the truth. Somebody who is older than you as a young man will need your strength. Somebody who is younger will also need your strength, and so much more. But not everyone appreciates and intends to cultivate your strength. You have to note that as a key message. Everybody needs your strength. They need your energy. They need your potentials, your innovations you have. But not everyone is willing to truly cultivate that potential you have as a young people. What I will say to you now is that you have to be watchful. You have to be careful who is tapping into it. Is it because they are now moving to you? Because in 4 to 5 months, you will be deciding whether that person goes to the executive mansion or that person goes to the legislature or other things of influence in our country. Maybe some people just need you for that energy. And you have to realize that you have a responsibility as you are protected by elders and others to also be on the watch and make sure you don't waste your energy. Don't allow your strength to be used on violence and hooliganism. The second thing I want to say to young people, we have been hearing about the ideology of using the old dump trucks that normally help in the building of the executive mansion. That they go and pick the sand and bring crushed rocks and different materials that are needed for the building. But after the building is done, that truck is not allowed to pass there. That could be a young person like you that could be used as that truck that is being used to build another house, to build another individual. And at the end of the day, even when you are passing around the legislature, around the Capitol building, maybe you'll be told, don't pass around here, don't pass around the office. So we have to be very cautious how we are utilizing our energy. Let's watch out and be able to follow individuals that have the love and track record, even they are with you both in good and bad season, not at a particular time when they need you most. So as young people, let's be on the guard to be able to help us to realize that we don't fall prey to this particular thing. I also want to say to young people, and my dear young people, that everyone has something to lose during the time of violence and hooliganism. But you have everything to lose. I will say that again. Everyone has something to lose during the time of violence. Everyone has something to lose. But young people have everything to lose. They have everything to lose because some of those initiating that in few years, and this is just how the earth is created, that when we live, maybe after 90 years or reaching 100, we have to leave the scene so another person will step in, and those people may leave you in a confused state and deprive you of some of the benefits that we saw with what we've been hearing the normal days, and we expect the return of those days we may not be getting. So what I'm saying is that in spite of violence and hooliganism affecting everyone, but young people, we are affected the most because your future could be strangulated. Imagine somebody who was 15 years or 18 years in 1990. They may have wasted 10 to 13 years of their time. Either they will not get quality education or they will move around and their future is likely to be affected. So when you are in this period, and in my UFO champion, I emphasize this in a whole chapter, when you are in this period, you have to be very cautious because anything you do right now is likely to follow you for the rest of your life. So I'll repeat this again as a message to young people that everyone has something to lose during a period of violence and hooliganism, but you have everything to lose during this period. And my advice to us is that we should not let our future, what we hope or anticipate, to be cut short because of such situation. So in the new Liberia we are trying to build, we cannot afford to use violence as an alternative to be able to address issues. Rather, let's learn from those people who have come before us. I like a Bible scripture that says, the things that were written aforetime are for our learning. So the things that happened in the 1970s, in 1979, in the 1980s, in the 90s, are all for our learning. Even the things that happened some months back are all for our learning. And if we refuse not to learn, then we end up paying the price much more. So I will advise us that non-violence is the best approach that we need to take as young people. And one thing, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, is that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. So when we have differences or issues, one thing we can apply as young people, instead of resorting to violence, is to exercise love so that we can create transformation. The way forward, again, the question that I was asked to explore in this lecture is violence and hooliganism. Is this the way forward? I believe from the deliberations we've had so far, the answer is already clear. It's a resounding big no, that we cannot and must not utilize violence as a way to go. It has never been the way to go, it will not be the way to go, and it can never be the way to go. I like the solution provided by one of those that came before us, what we could do as a way forward. And I quote Martin Luther King again. He says, violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to alienate rather than convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. What a message. So we need not to utilize violence because it is impractical, and this ends up destroying even the perpetrator of that violence. And it does not win the person who you are trying to cause violence against. You cannot win the love of a child by beating that child. In a way, you may try to gain some control now, but you don't know what is happening inside. And that is why I like the proposal that if you are trying to do that, maybe you use hatred and other means, and then after that, the person has put in something that may eventually come up to another stuff. So it is very much impractical to utilize violence as a way forward. Violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. Non-violence, rather, according to Mahatma Gandhi's suggestion, non-violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by ingenuity of man. These are people who were able to win for their country without deliberately, calculatively sharing of blood. And we have a responsibility to make sure as Liberians and as people who love this country, we will not use our love to exhibit hate. I believe a love used as the means of getting hate is not the way forward. Be as it may, provide few recommendations. Moving forward, we have laws against violence and different things in our nation. And if people cause violence, rather than playing game or politics around with violence, we have to investigate speedily and bring perpetrators to book so that in that way we can be able to stop such from happening again. And we can't give any excuses for doing such a thing. And we also know that the war had ended like 2 decades now. I know since 2003, and this is 2023, that's 20 years. We have ended this thing. And somebody who was born at the end of the war is now 20 years old. And then we can say that is a long enough period to continue to use that situation as a way for us to continue to perpetrate violence. If we are doing that, we are not helping our country at all. So those who are say challenged through different ways, who are taking drugs and other things, I suggest or recommend that we should initiate programs for these people so that we will help them transform to fit in the development agenda of our nation. And of course, by being able to deal with conflict and violence whenever they happen can be a way to let it go. And I end with a suggestion I provided earlier that when I visited South Africa in March for a leadership symposium, we saw how they have utilized their past to inform their present. And this is one of their strengths at this point. Through seeing that in their judiciary, through seeing that in different platforms, it will surprise you to note that where they had the women prison and different torturing and other things taking place, they had that place there with the photos and writings on the wall. But by that place is a great reception place on top of the mountain. Perhaps some of you have visited the Constitution Hill in South Africa, and there people sit and have receptions. But when they're passing by, while they're having a reception, they will not forget how people suffer for the country and they were treated likewise. So they will always have that mindset that people have paid the price for this country and we cannot afford to carry it back. What can we do? If there is any message I can give to you, young people in here and our wonderful elders, how can we push this in a way not just through the museum but through different ways? Not books are very good, but let it be a physical expression of some of the things. This is not about bringing war crimes court. If that's why we resolve to set the record straight, I won't have as a problem. But you just say that we are able to project those people, even starting from 1822, from our independence and different things that happened. When some presidents, where even others were thinking about taking our land and other things should happen to us, stood and said this can happen. So we need to read this, not just in books, but we also need to see them in writing. And through that way, history will be preserved and will become a much stronger country and a much stronger people. I believe it will be unfair if I don't say a word about the elections. And the elections in Africa in particular have been a major source of conflict and hooliganism. And people use this time to play on the emotions and maybe the immaturity in the young people to try to manipulate them for their self-interest. I want to say that all of us have a responsibility, and that is why we are sending this message strong to young people. Like I said, everybody has something to lose, but as young people, we have everything to lose. Therefore, we have to be very careful. We have to be make sure that we are not manipulated by ill-intentioned people for their own gain and using us, that through violence, some of them who have some chances will be able to send their own people out, and then you will be here to struggle. So we want all of us, as we have few months to the elections, let us do all we can do in our own right to say no to violence, to say no to hooliganism, and forbid any form that will be able to move us forward rather than carry us backward. I will say that there is a vaccination. A vaccination is available regarding what we need to do as we move ahead. And that vaccination is vaccination against violence, vaccination against hooliganism. How I wish that our hospitals. How I wish that our hospitals or different institutions we have the doses of these vaccinations that can be used to make sure we don't cause violence, vandalism, or any form of destruction to our country. But since the hospitals are not providing that, perhaps I can suggest that where you sit and where you operate, you can definitely have access to those doses that you can execute in dealing with violence and not making sure that they surface anywhere. Dose number one is love. Love is a dose that we need to vaccinate ourselves against violence. That instead of using hate or hatred to execute our plans or to revenge, we use love, as others have said, to be able to win the person who may have done something against us. And I think it doesn't cost much, and I believe it doesn't cost anything, in fact, to practice being very loving. Another dose I believe is necessary for us is patriotism. We need that dose, especially at this point as we go to election, that all of us want to see a better Liberia. But like I suggested in this presentation, you cannot destroy what you have in anticipation or in agitation for what you don't have. I believe that that is not a wise decision. If you have such challenge, then you need the dose of patriotism and also nationalism. We also need a dose of peace, because there was a song I listened to before, that peace is a champion. And I believe it's a time that we have to listen to that again and say that to ourselves. That peace is a champion now, is a champion tomorrow, and also a champion forever. Non-violence in general will need for us to act in a way showing love, showing patriotism, exercising peace, and then loving everyone. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts at this lecture series. It is my prayer that God will bless you and will save our country from violence and hooliganism.